If you edit images a lot, in particular if you actually have to add text to images, perhaps after a while you may find that the text you are adding is getting a little bit boring or perhaps repetitive. So what are some of the tricks you can do to actually breathe some life into this text? We'll discuss all this and more in today's episode on 0612 TV.
This is 0612 TV.
Welcome aboard.
Hello and welcome back to another Random Wednesday episode. As mentioned, today what we're going to do is we're going to go through 3 interesting font editing tips for your image editing experience. This is mostly a just for fun kind of thing, and it's greatly inspired by what my dad used to do on an older computer, so I guess credit for these techniques go to him. Of course, the usual prerequisites for image editors apply. You're gonna need a relatively modern image editor that supports layers and layer blending options. For this tutorial, I'm gonna be using GIMP 2.8, but well, the steps should be generic enough to follow in almost any image editor. So without further ado, let us jump right in. These are the 3 tips to make your text pop. The first of the 3 tricks is the perspective trick. Obviously, the first thing you're gonna need to do is to actually type out the text, so go ahead and do that. Now, you can either choose the text color to be black or white. Don't worry if that's not the color you want, we're gonna fix that later. Right now, choose either black or white depending on what is more contrasting. This is just to help, make things more visible for you. Now hop over to your toolbar and grab the perspective correction tool. Absolutely go to town on the text with that. Obviously, this is up to your artistic discretion, but of course, don't be afraid to make big changes if necessary. Also, don't be afraid to add on further iterations by using the rotation tool, the scaling tool, hell, even further applications of the perspective correction tool. What you're trying to achieve is just a stylized, distorted kind of look. The less uniform things look, the better. Once you're satisfied with this step, let us then move on to trick number 2, the gradient trick. Go through your program's gradients list to find a gradient you like, or alternatively, you can of course create your own gradient. Now, in your gradient tool, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set the blending mode to either one of these following 2 options. If your original text was white, then you're going to choose the multiply blending option. If the original text was black, you're going to choose the add blending option instead. Essentially, this selection will guarantee that when you actually draw out your gradient, it will only appear on top of the text and not anywhere else. Obviously, make sure you are still in your text layer and not in a different layer. And now, draw your gradient. Obviously, this also requires some experimentation to, determine what works best. As a basis, you probably want to draw a linear gradient from left to right. If you want it more stylized than this, you can try going at diagonals, even vertically, or you can try a different gradient type. Radial gradients also work really well for this purpose. And if you're not satisfied with the coloring, what you can do is you can actually enter your hue and saturation tool and just shift the hue. This will of course allow you to push the colors of the entire gradient around. And this will actually allow you to pick a combination you like, so that it doesn't look like one of the standard template gradients. So now we have a fancy colorful gradient, but if the background is complex or the colors just don't contrast too much, then you realize that your text still appears really flat. It doesn't really pop. What we need is a drop shadow. Shadows actually help create contrast in a very non-obstructive way, and it can really help bring an element into the foreground. Also, don't think of shadows as necessarily restricted to darker colors. You can always go for a really light shadow, and this will create a very nice glow around your text. Obviously, the color you choose will depend on what the background is like. If you have a dark background, you want a contrasting shadow, so you go for a light one. And of course, the converse holds true. Now, it's time to actually add your drop shadow. Start with one that is slightly off center and also just slightly blurred. Keep the intensity of this high. So essentially, you want to have a shadow with, not too much transparency. Bring your opacity up as much as possible. So now we have one shadow, it doesn't look like it's contributing a lot, which is why what we're going to do is we're going to add another drop shadow. What you're going to do for this one is you're going to set both the offsets to 0. Then increase the blur radius of the shadow. You may optionally bring down the intensity if you wish, and the effect we're going for is to have a shadow that is quite a bit more diffused than the previous one. The idea is to have a mix of drop shadows, with at least one being centralized. You can then tweak the intensities of each individual drop shadow layer to, well, get the effect you want. If you like to tweak the shadow even more, what you can do is you can actually jump in to modify its alpha value. If you're using GIMP, this is simple. Simply go to your drop shadow layer and enter the levels tool. Now search in the drop down for the alpha channel, and you can just use the levels tool to manipulate that. Use the gamma slider to increase or decrease the overall intensity of the shadow. You can also use the inputs and outputs to tweak the starting and ending intensities of the shadow. In Photoshop, you're gonna have to do an extra step of pulling out the transparency to a layer mask. Make sure you're editing the layer mask, and then you can enter the levels tool and tweak the blacks and whites. When you've completed this step, you should see that the text actually pops out very nicely. And there you have it. Just your 3 steps to actually, well, create text that really stands out and it's unique every time you try it. Thanks to the many different factors that actually go into making this text, what you're gonna get is you're gonna get a unique look every single time. And of course, this is important. Remember back in the day when word art was very popular? Well, yes, it looks nice, but everyone kinda does the same thing, so, well, it gets old really quickly. But with a technique like this, every single try is individual, every single try is unique on its own. But yes, that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, you're watching 0612 TV. Hello, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, remember that I appreciate every like, favorite, and comment you give me. If you'd like to see more from me in the future, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And for more updates outside of YouTube, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at 0612TV. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.